how old is knowledge? What do you think, Subhadra?
It's eternal.
Oh, she jumped straight to the punchline. She says it's eternal. Yeah, I gave this class in other places, and sometimes people would say, oh, it's probably as old as the oldest human being, or I don't know, it's as old as language or something, some people have said. She just got straight to the point. She said it's eternal. Why is it eternal? Why is knowledge eternal?
Because real knowledge is the truth, so the truth is always the truth forever.
Okay, that's a good point. If you want to know how old knowledge is, first you got to figure out what knowledge is. Before you can ask somebody what their age is, you need to know who they are. So before you can know how old knowledge is, you got to figure out what it is. So what is knowledge? What is it? Do you know me? Not really, right? Not so much. Tim, you know me a lot better than most. Right? So, why? Why do you know me? Because you're aware of me, you've experienced me. Spent time with me.
Time.
So knowledge is just like awareness of something. You know how to play the harmonium. To some extent, to a nice extent. You're good at it. You're aware of the harmonium, you know what the different keys are all about. You have knowledge of it. Knowledge equals awareness. Do you know San Diego? Yeah, I know San Diego. I've been there. Knowledge equals awareness. Awareness equals consciousness. Consciousness means awareness. Consciousness means to perceive something, to be aware of something. So knowledge is consciousness. There's no difference. Consciousness is knowledge. It's awareness. Awareness is knowledge. So how old is knowledge? Knowledge is as old as consciousness. Consciousness is knowledge. If you're conscious of something, then you know it. I'm conscious of this carpet. I know it. So consciousness is knowledge is as old as consciousness. So then the next question is, how old is consciousness? How old is consciousness?
Infinite.
Who said that? I agree with you, but a lot of people wouldn't agree with you. It's actually, this is the major point of contention between Bhagavad philosophy and other philosophy, especially modern philosophy. The major point of contention. Everything else can be resolved between modern science or modern philosophy and ancient Bhagavatam, Vedic philosophy. Everything else can actually be resolved and worked out. It's just different ways of looking at the same thing and different ways of expressing the same thing. But this one point is very different. We tend to think nowadays that consciousness is a product of reality. Consciousness was produced at some point in time within reality. It's something cool that's in reality, consciousness. Wow, it's a nifty part of reality. But that's not what the Bhagavatam, that's not how the Bhagavatam approaches consciousness at all. Consciousness doesn't, the Bhagavatam doesn't say at all that consciousness is produced by reality. The Bhagavatam says that reality is just something that happens within consciousness. Reality is a production of consciousness, not the other way around. So how old is consciousness? It's older than reality. It's as old as reality. That's why Subhadra jumped the gun, jumped straight to the punchline when I said, how old is knowledge? And she just said it's eternal. Because knowledge is consciousness, and consciousness is reality. Consciousness is reality. And reality is, you can't count how old it is. Reality is reality. It doesn't have a start. So knowledge is eternal. So how old is the Veda? Well, we could be slippery, sneaky folks. You could be using the word to mean a specific body of knowledge developed in India, but you could be answering the question of how old it is by referring to knowledge in general, and you could say it's eternal. But wait a minute, but these books were written. They had to be written at some point in time, right? So how can they be eternal? So I'll try to show you the link. How you get from this eternal knowledge to specific books. Sound good? You ready for this? I'm ready for it. All right, I hope I'm ready for it. So, once upon a time, in a galaxy, very, very close, there was a being, the first being in the universe. The universe was just empty. And slowly, slowly changing and evolving to produce different kinds of atoms. Bhumi, Appa, Anala, Vayu, Kam, Ana, Buddhi, Ahankara. So many different kinds of atoms and structures. Just empty universe with all these Lego blocks. Building but no Lego structures made. For billions of years. But then finally, the universe came to a condition where it could sustain an organic life form. And ping! In comes the first one. The super greatest of all life forms. Brahma. Brahma was born all by himself from a flower. And when he was born, when he opened up his eyes, he said, "What is this? Who am I? Where am I? What is going on?" All he could see was darkness all around, a scary looking ocean underneath him, a big flower that he's sitting on, with a stem going down into the water apparently, and going the flowers, the waves of the ocean, the winds are terrible. What is this? Who am I? What am I doing? He had no knowledge. He had no experience. He was not conscious. He had no prior consciousness of this situation that he was thrown into, so he had no knowledge of it. So he wanted to get some knowledge. That was his first task. The first task of the first life form was to get knowledge. So how did he try? He started sniffing around. That's why he's got 4 heads. You know that? We got any pictures of Brahma around? He's got 4 heads. He actually had 5 heads once. But he got into a fight with somebody you're not supposed to get into a fight with. Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva took one of his heads. But Brahma has multiple heads because he was looking around, trying to figure out where he was. Looking here, looking there, looking around. So looking east, west, north, and south, he developed heads to face in all 4 directions so he could look everywhere at once, and even one pointing up. Didn't care about looking down because he knew what that was. It was a flower. So he's looking all around, trying to find knowledge. Who am I? Where am I? What's this? And he just doesn't see anything but darkness. So he thinks, well, this flower must come from someplace. Okay, if I can find the bottom of this flower, where this comes from, I might find out what I am, where I come from. So he climbed. You've never seen a lotus flower? It has you guys got them in San Diego, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's got that big thing in the middle with the holes in them. He climbed into one of these holes. He climbed down inside the stem, and he's going down the stem, looking for the bottom of the lotus flower, going down, 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 down. Just when he thinks he's going to get to the bottom, this darkness, this thick darkness comes, and he can't get past it. And he just starts to feel tired and exhausted. And that was really scary. What the heck is this? I'm getting tired? There's a limit to my energy? There's a limit to my life? I might die. I better, this is crazy. I better not just keep running around this universe looking for knowledge. There must be a better way to do it. So he decided, I got to go back to where I was, climbed back up the stem, went back onto the lotus flower, sat down on that big thing in the middle, and he said, I'm going to take a different approach now. I'm going to calm down. That feels good. Okay, I'm going to try to control myself by breathing. This is working well. Okay, maybe I'll sit straight. oh, this is working. My mind's becoming clearer. For 100 years, he worked on his calming himself down, breathing carefully, just focusing on his own mind, focusing on his own consciousness. And gradually, he eventually came into contact with knowledge. Why? Knowledge is consciousness. By searching outside of yourself, it becomes exhausting to try to find some bits and pieces of knowledge. But if you can calm your external focus, and if you can calm all the noise, and just come into contact with the actual consciousness, which is you, it's full of knowledge. So Brahma, by calming himself down, practicing what we nowadays call yoga, he came into contact with knowledge. And then how did he get this knowledge? He found that within himself he could see this other being, Vishnu, a beautiful, dark, handsome and beautiful man with 4 arms reclining on a serpent on the water, and the lotus flower was coming out from his navel. And Vishnu spoke to him. Spoke or not spoke, we don't know exactly if it's in words. But Vishnu communicated to Brahma all the knowledge that Brahma needed. So Veda, it's eternal because it comes from consciousness. But where's the original consciousness? That's the real thing that you need to know. You're a consciousness. I'm a consciousness. But you're a limited consciousness and I'm a limited consciousness. I'm conscious of Japan. You're conscious of America most of the time. Or I'm conscious of some things, you're conscious of other things. And what I'm conscious of, you don't really know. And what you're conscious of, I have no idea. So we have limited consciousness. We're just conscious of subsets of reality. Well, how come there's this great big reality? Why isn't there just a bunch of fragmented realities? There's a bunch of fragmented people. There's a bunch of fragmented consciousness. Why is there one unified reality? It's not exactly unified. You have a different outlook than I do, slightly. But there's some unifying factor. We're looking at the same thing. Why is that? Because there's a super consciousness. The super consciousness called Paramatma. That's the origin of all consciousness. And all the little minute fragments of consciousness are participating in that. So Brahma, by searching within himself, he discovered that the root of himself is the Paramatma. The root of the self is the super self. And from that super self, he got all this consciousness. He got all this knowledge. So then he realized what he is and what he's supposed to do. He realized, I'm supposed to create a whole bunch of places for people to exist, bodies for people to inhabit, structures, social structures, different things for people to live in, so that all these different consciousnesses can come out from Vishnu and do their thing, play out their karmas. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's what he did. And he started out by making 7, 8, or 12 or 13 great rishis from his brain, from his mind, from his head. He created these other beings called rishis. And there's 7 special ones. And he taught them what he had learned from Vishnu. And by teaching them what he had learned from Vishnu, that was how language was brought into existence. When Brahma tried to communicate knowledge, it came out in words. And the words became language. And those words are the beginning of the Veda that we have as a specific body of knowledge cultivated in India. It's the beginning of it, the very beginning of it. Ancient, we're talking ancient. So, that's the first time that it got put into words. Brahma, he went into meditation and he found knowledge from Vishnu. Right? And then when he tried to express this to the rishis that he created, it came out in words. And those rishis, they recorded those words in their mind and they began to teach it to others. So this went on for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and this was called Yajur-Veda. The Veda of life. the knowledge of life, of how to live and get what you want without being a bad guy. That's the problem with the world, is this very fine balance between being a good guy and a bad guy. Because everybody wants what they want. But how do you get what you want without being a bad guy? Because if you're a bad guy, it's just going to screw things up for you anyway. Because you make the world a bad place and you got to live in the world. And then you get future karma also, which is bad. So you don't want to be a bad guy. It's not even in your best interest. So how do you get what you want without being a bad guy? That's what the Veda is kind of mostly about. The knowledge of life. How to get what you want without being evil. So it's called Yajurveda. So for thousands of years it went on like that. The rishis teaching other people the Veda. But guess what? Paradise only lasts for a little while. Things get screwed up gradually. Things get messed up. Things get lost. Things get confusing. Things which were once clear become confusing. Especially as time goes on. So there's these four eras, or epochs, in the universe. One's called Satya, which means that the epoch in which everything is totally clear. And another one is called, then the other ones are just numbered actually, 3, 2, and 1. Satya is the only exciting name. Satya, the age of truth. And then 3, 2, and 1. Age 3, age 2, age 1. Treta, Dwapara, Kali. Kali means the lowest, the worst, or the number 1. So anyway, there's these 4 ages, and as the ages progress, the ability for people to understand the Veda, it got all foggy. So by the time it got to the end of age number 2, the ages descend. First one is 4, 3, 2, 1. And then it goes back to 4, 3, 2, 1. By the time it got to the end of age 2, nobody could figure out what the hell the Veda was really about. It was just a bunch of words talking about weird things. And all people could understand from it was a bunch of stuff about rituals or some strange philosophy. Nobody could understand it anymore. Even Brahma was confused about it. So what had to happen? Anybody ever write a book? I wrote a bunch. I got some of them here today if you want to buy some. The most important part of writing the book is editing it. Because when you first write it, it sounds great to you. Then when you go back and you read it, you're like, what? What was I talking about? You got to edit it, make it clear. So what happened at the end of the Dwapara Yuga, the second age number 2? Vishnu himself had to come, fix things up. He took an incarnation as Vyas, the editor of knowledge. That's a great post, isn't it? You might be the editor of the San Diego Union Tribune. But how would you like to be the editor of knowledge? Veda Vyas. Vishnu gets to be that chief editor. Of course, in other cycles, it's not Vishnu. But in this particular one, it is, because this one's special. So Vishnu or some other person comes and takes the role of editor, and he edits knowledge. Wow. Now this is where it's starting to come to the point that we're going to talk about the books that you can actually read today. After it gets edited. Before it gets edited, there was just like 1 billion verses in the Veda. But after Vyas came, he said, this needs to have some more structure. And it needs just to be simplified and clarified. So he thought, okay, the biggest subject in the Veda is, anybody know? The main subject in the Veda? I told you already.
Karma? Activity?
Yeah, I kind of told you. What did I?
Conscious.
How to get what you want
Without being a bad guy.
without being a bad guy. That's the main subject of the Veda. How to get what you want without being a bad guy. And the way to do it is to sacrifice. If you want bubble gum, pay some money for it. Pay the guy behind the counter. Then you're not a bad guy when you take the bubble gum. But if you want bubble gum and you don't pay the guy behind the counter, you're a bad guy. And the police are going to get you and make life miserable for you. when they call your mom and dad. So that's what sacrifice really is. You pay something to get something. Sacrifice, that means you give something away to get something back. So sacrifice. So it doesn't have, so it can be simple like, all right, you build this altar and you sacrifice all these plants and you make this juice and you do these mantras and you call down the gods and you give them this great soma. Or you can even, like, some of the sacrifices are like, okay, you have to kill this animal, you have to get rid of you have to kill the things that you rely on, and then you in a future life get blah 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 blah. There's different ways of just like giving up what you have in order to get something. That's called sacrifice. That's the main subject of the Veda. How to get what you want without being evil. So Vyasa said, well, that's the main subject of the Veda, so let me devote some significant attention to that. I'm going to divide it into 4 sections. I'm going to divide it into the mantras that you got to chant, the ways that you got to set up the ritual, the way that the ritual is performed, and the way that you fix stuff that goes wrong. So that's why it has 4 different sections. The mantras that you chant are the Rig Veda. And then the way that you set it up is the... actually, the way you set it up and perform the ritual is the Yajur Veda. And then there's something called Sama Veda, which is the songs that you chant during the yajna, during the sacrifice. And then there's a Tarva Veda for getting specific results or fixing problems that happen during the sacrifice. So he broke it down. He edited the Veda. He made it simpler. Now if you want to know something about the mantra, you look at this one. If you want to know something about how to do the ritual, you look at that one. And then he took these other sections and he made a 5th one. So Brahma had spoken all these verses and the rishis had created all these mantras. And Brahma took them and made 4 Vedas about sacrifice from that. And then he took the rest and made a 5th. The 5th, anybody know the name of the 5th? Rig, Sama, Yajur, Atharva. What's the 5th one? Eventually.
Upanishads.
Not Upanishads. Eventually Vedanta Sutra. Puranas. The Purana is the 5th Veda. What's Vedanta Sutra? We'll talk about that. What's Bhagavatam? We'll talk about that. What are the Upanishads? We'll talk about that. And if you're still awake at the end of that, I'll give you 5 cents. Anyway, you got to learn stuff sometime. So, the Vedas... Okay, so what happened was Vyasa... This process happened over generations. It didn't just happen like boom. It happened over generations, and he wrote out these 4 Vedas. And when was this happening? If you want some idea of the actual dates of history, when was this happening that Vyasa was taking Brahma's words and putting them into writing? And when? Do you have any idea? Yeah.
5,000 years ago?
Roughly 5,000 years ago, baby. This is the way that we date things. Scholars date things by saying, how young can't it be? How new can it not be? That's how they date things. It must be old. Like, for example, I'm 45 years old. So how old is my mom? What do you think? Is she 43? She's definitely not 43, right? I'm 45. So how old is my mom? Probably at least 55. At least 56. She's at least 56, right? So that's how scholars date things. You find something that you know for sure, and then you say, this other thing can't be younger than it, so it's roughly about this age. And we can also date a little bit like that, but we also have some specific information. So our specific information is that Vyasa came in the 3rd section of Dwapara Yuga. So Dwapara Yuga depends on how you calculate it. If you want to use a celestial Dwapara Yuga or a human Dwapara Yuga. If you use celestial Dwapara Yuga, it's 360 times the length of a human Dwapara Yuga. If you use a human Dwapara Yuga, it's 2,000 years long. 2,400. Because it has an intro, a main section, and an outro. Just like a good song. So, Vyasadeva came at the outro of Dwapara Yuga. So we know that Kali Yuga began 5,000 years ago. So like you said, it's at least 5,000 years ago that Vyasa was doing this stuff. But it's before that. Like my mom is at least 45, but definitely more than 45. So this was definitely more than 5,000 years ago. And the outro of Dwapara Yuga, it could be as long as like, what is it? 86,000 years could just be the Dwapara Yuga outro. So it's like a huge window of time. Or even if you keep it as the human length, it's 400. That's really short. 400 years. That's like nothing. So anyway, about 5,000 years ago, about more than 5,000 years ago, Vyasadeva came and started editing Brahma's Veda. And he made 4 Veda and a 5th one called the Purana. And then he put a different scholar in charge of each one. He said, all right, you're going to be the scholar of the Rig Veda, you're going to be the scholar of the Atharva Veda, you're going to be the scholar of the Puranas, you're going to be the scholar of the Sama Veda, and you're going to be the scholar of the Yajur Veda. Now you develop it and explain it and elaborate on it with your students. Go. And then over the next generations and generations, these scholars, these 5 scholars with their students, elaborated on the Veda. This is all there in the Bhagavatam. All this history is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. First canto. So, during that time, during those generations where the Veda was being elaborated on, different things got created. Why is the Veda called Apurusheya? Eternal and without a human origin? Because it comes from Vishnu. Knowledge is consciousness. Consciousness is without human origin. Consciousness is not created at some point in time. Consciousness is knowledge, and Vishnu delivered that knowledge to Brahma. That's the origin of the Veda. But it doesn't mean that it wasn't written at some point in time. The Veda is eternal and beyond human origin, but that doesn't mean that a human didn't print the Bhagavatam at Thompson Press in Delhi. You know what I'm saying? The knowledge that's in there is eternal, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't change its form and get printed at certain points in time. Or even written at certain points in time. So about 5,000 years ago, these sections of the Vedas are evolving. So in every Veda you have a main section called a Samhita. Like the Rig Samhita, the Yajur Samhita, right? That's the main section. Then you have these additional things that got added. The Aranyakas, the Brahmanas, and the Upanishads. That's what the Upanishads are. The Upanishads are explanations of what the Vedas are about. What's the meaning behind the Veda? What's all this stuff? What's the philosophy of it? So the Upanishads are revealing the philosophical import of the Veda. So if you want to read philosophy, if you want philosophy from the Veda, you go to the Upanishads. If you want rituals and how to do sacrifices, you go to the Samhita. The Brahmanas are sections that explain exactly how to do different portions of the rituals. And the Aranyakas, they simplify the rituals. You don't have to do the full elaborate thing. Okay? So then you got each Veda. Each of the 4 Veda has 4 sections. So it's tons of books now, after a few generations after Vyasa started the thing. And then he's thinking to himself, I'm really glad that the Upanishads, have manifest, but these things are pretty confusing. Has anybody here ever studied Upanishads? Oh God. Nobody in here has studied the Upanishads? Isha Upanishad. That's a bona fide Upanishad. Yeah, there's a couple of important Upanishads. Aitariya, Taittiriya, Chandogya. Those are the super important ones. If you try to study them though, they're very mystifying. They're very mystifying. So Vyasa was like, well, but the whole purpose of me editing the Veda was to make it less mystifying. But the product that I've produced that I'm happy with is the Upanishads, but it's mystifying again. I wish I could do something to make it less mystifying. That's when he himself decided, I'm going to write another book. And that book's name is? Vedanta. The Vedanta, he said, I'm going to summarize the conclusion of the Veda. Veda Anta, the end of the Veda. And it's a sutra. I'm going to pull a thread. Sutra means thread. I'm going to pull a thread through all these Upanishads and tie them all together into one nice little book that summarizes everything. And that's what he did. The Vedanta Sutra is an amazing book. But if you thought the Upanishads were mystifying, the Vedanta Sutra is 10 times more mystifying because it's so concise. There's like 3 words and there's like 16 pages of meaning for 3 words. And then there's another 3 words with another 38 pages of meaning. So it's really, really complicated. So again, he felt, I'm trying hard here, but I'm not accomplishing my intended mission of simplifying the Vedas and making it clear. So, what can I do? Then what did he do, Dayanidhi? Do you remember? Do you know? You don't know. You know. You know.
Yoga Sutra?
You don't know? What?
Yoga Sutra?
No. Many different authors wrote many different sutras. After Vyasa wrote Vedanta Sutra, everybody got an idea that this is great. So then different people wrote different kinds of sutras. For example, there's a Yoga Sutra written by Patanjali. Summarizes all the teachings on yoga. There's a Kama Sutra by... Anybody know the author? I forgot the name. By somebody. Summarizes all the teachings on how to have pleasure. There's a... Nyaya Sutra. All this teachings on logic. And there's so many different sutras. Those weren't authored by Vyasadeva. After he wrote the Vedanta Sutra but felt that it didn't really accomplish his goal, what did he do next?
Puranas.
Puranas? Puranas were already written.
Bhagavatam.
Almost.
Mahabharata.
Good guess. Mahabharata. Who said that? Good, you got it. He thought to himself, people need stories. People need stories. And also he thought, I don't just want to rarefy this so that only geeks understand it. I want real people to understand this stuff. Not just philosophers. So regular people need stories. Like it's been a long time since I told you a story, so you're starting to drift. I got to tell you something else about Brahma or something. And people need stories. So he thought, if I could just illustrate these principles, this philosophy, in a story form, that might accomplish what I want to accomplish. So he thought, what better subject than to tell the tale of these very pious kings who were close friends of Krishna, who's Vishnu, the source of knowledge to begin with, and the ultimate object of knowledge. So, let me tell the story of the history of India, Mahabharata, which first was called the Bharata. Later, as it became elaborated on, became the Mahabharata. Let me tell the story of Bharata, the country of India, based on all these great kings. And we'll focus especially on the Pandavas and how they lived with Krishna. Yeah, that's a great idea. And he wrote the Mahabharata. Mahabharata is a great book. Great book. It's so great that it's said that if you put the Mahabharata on a scale and you put all the rest of the Vedas on the other side of the scale, the Mahabharata would still be heavier. That's what the Puranas say about the Mahabharata. So, sounds great, right? He wrote the Mahabharata. Was he satisfied? Not quite. Almost. What was missing? What was missing from the Mahabharata?
Relationship. Rasa?
No, there's some rasa in the Mahabharata.
Emphasis on Vishnu.
Yeah. Kind of like the emphasis on... It's kind of like when you tell a story, and you get really into telling the story, because you want to tell the story to illustrate this point, right? But you get really into telling the story, and everybody gets really into the story, and you kind of drift a little bit away from understanding the point. So he told this fantastic Mahabharata, and everybody got really into the Mahabharata. Everybody got really into all these different things that are going on. And Krishna was like kind of a side character in there. And the principles of Dharma maybe were taking even a bigger center stage than Krishna. And but he was thinking, I really want to point people to the object of knowledge, Krishna. This is something that we have to talk about, if we have time. We have to talk about this now. So, how should we put this in there? So what did he do? He thought, this is miserable. I've been working on this for hundreds of years. It's been generations that he's been working on the Veda. And I still didn't get it right. I think I'm just going to give up. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to go back to my house. He went back to Badrik Ashram. And he just sat down there and he was like, what should I do next? I have no idea. Then Narada Muni came and he explained to him, he said, you know what your problem is? Your problem is that you didn't point people to the ultimate object of knowledge, Krishna. You just danced around the whole thing, explaining some philosophy without the point of the philosophy, explaining some religion without the point of the religion. You didn't get right to the issue. And if you want to tell stories, these are the best stories. And if you want to illustrate the philosophy, it has to be connected with this. It has to be connected with Krishna. So you have to present the scripture which explains what you explained in Vedanta Sutra, but makes it more clear. Just make the Vedanta Sutra more clear. So he said, okay, I can do that. I can take this Bhagavad Purana and I can redo it. The Bhagavad Purana was written as one of the 18 original Puranas. It's the 5th Veda. But after Narada Muni informed him what to do, he said, okay, I can take this Bhagavad Purana and I can revise it. And I can make it so that it explains the Vedanta Sutra and illustrates the Vedanta Sutra with the person of Krishna as the main focus. Then he was happy. So that's the ancient history of the Veda and how it becomes the Bhagavatam. The Veda begins with Vishnu revealing knowledge to Brahma as a result of his meditation. And then Brahma explaining the same thing to the sages. And the sages trying to explain it to others, but it becomes more and more confusing. And then Vyas comes to help. He edits the things, he puts them all into different books. He creates 4 Vedas, he creates the Puranas. He gives different scholars charge to develop it. They create Upanishads. He brings the Vedanta Sutra to bring all the Upanishads together. It was too philosophical. He writes the Mahabharata to give a good storyline. It was too much story. He combines the two, the storyline and the philosophy, as the Bhagavatam. And then he says, I did it. Nigamakalpaturor galitam palam. Nigamakalpaturor galitam palam. This is the palam, the fruit of the tree, taror, of the nigama, of the knowledge. The tree of knowledge has finally borne fruit as this Bhagavatam. I'm done. Hallelujah. And that's it. The Bhagavatam is the crown jewel of the Veda. And anybody who studies the Veda, but needs to study the Bhagavatam to understand what it's all about. So if you study the Bhagavatam, you understand all the Veda. So that's the importance of Bhagavatam. So I just want to talk a little bit more, because another topic is supposed to be Krishna Bhakti, and what is its position in the Vedas, right? Because most of the Veda is about sacrifice. It's the main topic of the Veda. Where's Krishna Bhakti in that? So, and what is this Krishna thing anyway? Who is Krishna? What's this all about? So, what time is it? 9:00? Oh. So, if you remember, I said that knowledge is consciousness, right? Remember that all the way back a million years ago when we started? How old is knowledge? Well, what is knowledge? Knowledge is awareness of things. What is awareness? Awareness is consciousness. Well, how old is consciousness? Consciousness doesn't have an age. Consciousness is reality. Now, what's Krishna? Krishna is that original consciousness. The original basis of reality is Krishna, from whom everything comes into being, for whom everything exists. What is that? That's consciousness. Everything comes from consciousness and exists for consciousness. But it's not just you and me consciousness. We're just small consciousness. There's a super consciousness creating the whole reality in which we exist. And our consciousness is also a product of that. So consciousness needs an object. Consciousness needs an object. What is consciousness unless it has something to be conscious of? That's bhakti. That's love. I need you. Isn't that a very key component of love? The feeling that I need you. My existence is not complete without you. Is that not love? That's love, isn't it? Consciousness itself is love. If you can get to the pure form of consciousness, it is bhakti. It is love. Because what is consciousness? Consciousness is something that needs something to be conscious of. It needs a relationship. It needs somebody to see. It needs somebody to experience. It needs something to experience. And what else does it want? It wants to be that thing for somebody else. Consciousness wants to be something, wants to provide that service to somebody else. That's love. What I need, I want you to have. Not just taking, but giving. I need something to be conscious of. You need something to be conscious of. I want to be that thing for you. And I need you to be that thing for me. That's how consciousness works. That is called bhakti. That's called love. There's no truth to the notion that bhakti is a romantic, sentimental idea that evolved in the religious history of mankind. There's no truth to that notion. It's a superficial reading of the letters of history. The fact of the matter is that bhakti or love is the essential nature of what we are. If we could ever get to what we purely are, it's all bhakti. We need something to be conscious of, and we want to be something for somebody else to be conscious of. We need that relationship. So what is the thing to be conscious of? So many different possibilities, but what is the ultimate thing to be conscious of? The original consciousness. The original consciousness, which is the source of all reality. The Gopal Tapani Upanishad says that's what the name Krishna means. Krishna. Krish means reality, and na means nivriti, without any effort. The reality that exists without any effort. What's that? Consciousness. Consciousness is the reality which exists without any effort. It's self-existent. Krishna means that, according to Gopal Tapani Upanishad, and Jiva Goswami quotes it in Tattva Sandarbha. So, Krishna is the original source of consciousness. Vishnu, Krishna, Narayana. These are all synonyms, according to Amar Kosh. These are all synonyms. They mean the same thing. Vishnu, the source of all consciousness. Krishna, the source of all consciousness. The source of all consciousness is the thing that should be looking at us, and we should be looking at him, it, her, whatever. That's the object that we're thirsty for, and that's the object that we're thirsty to be seen by. So Krishna Bhakti, it's not a notion that develops at some point by evolution or something. It's the key core essence of what the Veda is. It's the key core essence of what consciousness is. You see? Makes sense? And then even in all the different branches and subparts of the Veda, it's still evident. Bhakti is still evident. Even if you just look at the concept of sacrifice. What is sacrifice? Why should I sacrifice? I'll just take what I want. The whole idea that there would be some submission to sacrifice evidences some sort of bhakti, that I shouldn't just take from the world. I should give something back. So even sacrifice itself is presenting the idea of bhakti. It's just that it's presenting it to people that are not particularly interested in it. You see, the thing about the Veda is, it's not stereotypical. It's not sectarian, or it's not judgmental. The Veda is very non-judgmental. If you want something crazy that I think is totally crazy and weird, I'll teach you how to do it. I'll teach you how to get it. That's what the Veda says. You want some weird thing that's disgusting? No problem. This is how you do it. The Veda doesn't make any judgments. It teaches everybody whatever they want to know, whatever they need to know. So that's why it has so many different things in it. That's why it's so vast. So there's a huge section of the Veda that doesn't really explicitly talk about Krishna at all. Because it's talking to people that are not really interested at all in the root, original object of consciousness. They just want to know how to get their bubblegum. They just want to know how to get some money. They just want to know how to get a good husband or a good wife. So why should the Veda bother them by preaching to them about something? Yeah, but you really have to chant Hare Krishna. Then they just say, all right, you want a good husband, you get to do this. You get good qualities, and then you'll attract the right man. So a lot of the Veda is not explicitly saying Krishna, 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 Krishna. But the whole underlying concept of the idea of sacrifice is part and parcel of bhakti. I won't just take, but I also owe you something. That's a beginning of love. And the Upanishads are just trying to show you, the Upanishads, the philosophical or the jnana section of the Veda, it's also all about bhakti. The Upanishads are just trying to show you who you really are. Because everybody has their own self-interest at heart. And you can never erase that. No matter how much you try to be really good, you can never erase the fact that you're an individual, and therefore you'll always have your individual interests. But the problem is, everybody has their swartha, my own interest. The problem is, according to Prahlad Maharaj, nate vidhu swartha gatim, he Vishnu. People don't know that their real self-interest is in Vishnu. We think that our real self-interest is in my car, my house, my job, my family. But Prahlad Maharaj said, people don't know that the real self-interest is in Vishnu. Why? Because the real self is just a ray coming from Vishnu. So how can you do anything good for yourself? It's like saying, I just like the light. I want my house to be full of light, but no candles and no light bulbs. How can you have a house full of light if you have no light source? So how can you love yourself if you have no concept of what the self is coming? Where's the self rooted? Where's it coming from? And you say, there's no root. But if there's no root, then how can our realities coexist at all? Your consciousness is aware of totally different things than me. My consciousness is aware of totally different things than you. If there's no common root to the both of our consciousness, how can you be hearing the words that I'm saying right now? Our consciousness would not be able to mingle. There's a common root between all the consciousnesses. There's a common self at the root of all these individual selves. That's the true self-interest. That's what the Upanishads are trying to teach. Why? Because it's so important for bhakti. Because everybody will act for their own self-interest. That's why love, perfect love, with another separated individual is not fully possible. Because there's always the sense that this person is this person and I'm me. But the Upanishads are trying to teach that Vishnu or Krishna is the true root of the self. There's no barrier to loving Vishnu or Krishna because it's your own self-interest also. He's your own self. He's the root of yourself. So that's what the Upanishads are all about. So it's not that there's no bhakti in the Upanishads. The Upanishads are all about bhakti. They're trying to clarify who you really are so that selfishness doesn't get in the way, because selfishness is the antithesis of love. And then you have the Puranas, that's the Bhakti mark section. That's all Bhakti straight out. That's obvious. So where's Krishna Bhakti in the Vedas? It's everywhere. It's the essence of what it originally is. It's in every section. But not always so loudly or directly or right in front of your face, because sometimes it's just not relevant to the people that section is intended for. But the most prominent section where you'll find Bhakti described is in the fifth Veda, the Purana. And especially in the greatest Purana, the Mahapurana, the Srimad Bhagavatam. So if you want to learn anything about Bhakti Yoga, you got to read the Bhagavatam. But that's the thing. Last point that I'll make tonight. The Veda is knowledge, right? But how did Brahma get knowledge? You remember? Yeah. It wasn't just by like checking on Google and studying books. It was there was introspection. So the method of reading the Veda is slightly different from the method of reading a Harlequin romance novel. Or than reading, like, I don't know, some other book. The method of reading the Veda requires some abhideya. It requires some methodology, some sadhana, some spiritual practice to reveal the meaning of the Veda. So if you can combine your study of the Bhagavatam with some spiritual practice, then you can then the Bhagavatam comes to you, reveals itself, and then you can understand everything about Bhakti. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this discussion of the ancient history of the Vedas and the position of Krishna Bhakti in the Vedas. And I hope that there's some new interesting concepts maybe came out. Want to ask any questions or say anything? There's a couple.
Very nice elaboration, very enlightening. One question. I've heard that Mahaprabhu, 500 years ago in Kerala, he heard Brahmins chanting the Brahma Samhita, and he wrote it down and brought it to his associates. And in that, I believe Brahma states that he heard the Abhideya, the Tapa, and Divya Saraswati, and by performing meditation, he heard the Pranava Om Kara, and then the flute playing of Krishna, which then revealed all the knowledge of the spiritual world. How does that fit the Brahma Samhita in with all the Vedas that you've described? And is this a very simplification of the Leela of Brahma coming to terms?
Well, that's a great question.
Revealed knowledge?
That's a really good question. Give me a couple of weeks, and I'll give you a definite answer. But it may, for right now, to be able to just reply something quickly, it's not that everything fits neatly into one of the categories or another. Especially Brahma Samhita, which was just lost. Nobody knew about this book except for one temple in South India. So it wasn't developed or it wasn't incorporated into any traditional teachings. So it might not really be clear as to what branch it belongs to or this and that. But it's called a Samhita and it's spoken by Brahma. So we would assume that it's one of the original things that Brahma told to the rishis. But there's controversy about the Brahma Samhita. Not everybody accepts it. But Gaudiyas accept it. We accept it.
It's what we were chanting earlier.
Yeah.
Govinda Madhipurusha.
Yeah. And the material that you mentioned that's described there in the Brahma Samhita, it's described also in the Bhagavatam. So even without Brahma Samhita, it's the same storyline is there. The Bhagavatam mentions that when Brahma was meditating, Adi Saraswati. That's what you said, right?
Divya Saraswati.
Yeah, Adi Saraswati came to him and gave him clean Krishnaya, Govindaya, this mantra. And then he began to, instead of just breathing, then he was doing mantra yoga. When his mind was clear, he was focusing on this mantra. This is the full detailed story of Brahma's enlightenment. And by meditating on that mantra, he could have darshan of Krishna. Krishna. That's even in the Bhagavatam too. It said that in the Bhagavatam it says that he saw 1 foot of Vishnu. So I don't know if you can see these ugly feet, but 1 foot of Vishnu means this. This is Krishna's stance. So that's a hint in the Bhagavatam that also it's as what was told in the Brahma Samhita that he saw Krishna. And then by seeing Krishna he heard the flute. And then in the Brahma Samhita it's characterized that the knowledge was given like that, but in the Bhagavatam there's a Chatur Shloki, which is the Vyasa's representation of how Vishnu imparted the knowledge to Brahma. So the reason why the Adi Saraswati is so interesting too. Who is this Saraswati? Brahma is the only one in the universe. So who is this Saraswati? Saraswati comes later. She's created later. So the Adi Saraswati was actually Lakshmi, Vishnu's consort Lakshmi, who's an expansion of Radharani. That's why she was actually Radharani. Lakshmi has no business giving a mantra of Govinda Gopijana Vallabhaya Swaha. So it was actually Srimati Radharani who came to Brahma at this time.
Thank you so much for this notion that reality is not separate from consciousness. Reality is a product of consciousness. Is it related to the notion that you write about when explaining why Krishna is neutral to the material creation? And you say that it's automatic because it happens so that the individual souls work out their karma. And Vishnu just glances at them. It's neutral in the whole ordeal. Are these two concepts related? And is it different with what they say that it's like if a tree falls in the jungle and nobody's there to witness it, as it really falls?
Yeah, this is a good one. If a tree falls in the forest, but nobody hears it, doesn't make a sound.
Wow.
That's this philosopher's way of trying to explain that reality is a product of consciousness. Because how could it make a sound if there's nobody to hear it? But the problem with the analogy is that how could a tree exist in the first place if there was nobody there? The tree itself is a conscious being. And even if there was just nothing, the supersoul always exists everywhere. This is what's maintaining. Reality is being maintained by consciousness. And even if there's no individual consciousness, there's always Vishnu's consciousness, manifesting an underlying reality. So even when all the consciousness is supta, or dissolved or sleeping, which happens after trillions of years, people get tired of their karmas, and they all go to sleep. Even at that time, Vishnu is manifesting reality, but it's a very basic reality. And then your other question was,
It's like
why is Vishnu neutral to the material?
yeah, right. So you're right. You're right. That's necessary in this class. Explaining that, I don't know, for instance, 11th chapter of the Gita, that after saying that without form, it's like that horrific, form of Vishnu. The way that you explain that Vishnu is actually neutral to the whole thing. You mentioned that it's the consciousness of if it's the individual souls that enacts the material creation, right? And Vishnu just glances to it. It's neutral.
Okay, that's a nice question. So this reality, basically I'll summarize this question. This reality that we exist in, is it crafted? I might be kind of fudging your question a little bit to make it more of the question that I intend to answer. Is this reality crafted by Vishnu? Is this reality crafted by God? Or is this reality crafted by the individual consciousness?
That's a good.
In the Gita, I wish I could remember the exact verse. in the Gita, but not just in the Gita, but everywhere, it's explained that Maya, or the substance of this world, is a thing which responds to the consciousness of the individual. So that the individual consciousnesses are creating their own realities. We're creating this world. We're creating this world. So but it's just like if I give my children Legos, and then they build a space station. So they're responsible for making the Legos into a space station. But I'm the guy who gave them the Legos. So in the same way, God gives us, first of all, God manifests as us as consciousness, as conscious beings with will, and then He gives some energy, some building blocks to us to do stuff with, for us to do stuff with. That's called Maya. So it's like giving us Legos. It's like having us as children and then giving us Legos. But whether or not we make a X-Wing fighter or a My Pretty Pony, My Little Pony with the Legos, that's up to us. So the same way, God's given us this world, but what we do with it is up to us. And He's completely neutral to what you do. He's completely neutral to what you do. It's your affair. So people have the idea like God is like really wrapped up in what we're doing and stuff like that, but actually we're just really wrapped up in what we're doing. And God is just giving us space to do it. And He's just waiting for us to be interested in coming back into a larger space, which is full of Bhakti, instead of this space where it's a whole bunch of selfish little guys trying to get as many Legos as they can.
At least like 3 times in Gita, until chapter 14 that I've been reading, he used this like concept to explain a verse, and like that's really beautiful. It was a very nice explanation of what's happening. But I could understand from like word by word translation how he come up with this from the verse, right? But I couldn't like see similar things, similar concept in Sri Prabhupada. Where have you come up with this?
So he's asking a question about my Bhagavad Gita, a simple Gita, which you can buy today, over there.
It's very beautiful.
And he's saying sometimes you write things in the simple Gita that I don't see any. I can see how it comes from the original Sanskrit, but I don't see how it was there in Prabhupada's translation. So where did you get this idea? Well, one thing is that I read the Sanskrit, which I encourage everybody to do because that's why Prabhupada put it in the book. And then the other thing is, Prabhupada opens the door. Prabhupada's teachings opens up the door to all of his teachers. So, Prabhupada, when he wrote the Bhagavad Gita as it is, he had Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary to the Gita open. Would read from that and then give his explanation. But if you study Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on the Gita, you get a lot of ideas that are behind the ideas that Prabhupada was explaining. And you can, these days with the internet, you can get like 8 different acharyas' commentaries on the Gita already translated into English. So that's where I get my stuff. It's mostly Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. If something that you read in my Gita is not obviously something from Prabhupada's thing, it's probably from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, or just from the Sanskrit. My fertile imagination. All right. Anything else? Why don't we do a little more kirtan and then we'll have some prasadam, huh? Okay? Hey everybody. You guys are kind of quiet. We did a program on, what was it, Monday?
Monday.
A nice small house. Everybody was cozy. But you guys, it's like a big house and I feel a little bit like, is everything okay? Yeah? All right. Yeah, you can stop that one. Thank you. Well, That's the point of the Veda. The point of the Veda is focusing your consciousness on the correct object of consciousness. Isn't it? That's the whole thing. The original root of knowledge is that consciousness wants some object to be conscious of. And that the supreme object of the consciousness is the originator of the consciousness, Krishna. So if you how would you do that? You live in San Francisco, you live in San Diego, you live in Encinitas. How do you focus on Krishna? He's not exactly available on the street corner. But he's kind of given you a way. He said, here's my names. If you focus on my names, it's quite similar to focusing on the person. So chanting Hare Krishna is just a way to focus your consciousness where it belongs, on the original consciousness, and it's the essence of bhakti. The essence of bhakti is to pay attention to the person you love. The essence of love is to pay attention to the person that you love. So the essence of chanting is to pay attention to Krishna by putting your mind, centering your mind on his name. We'll do a little bit more of that. Yes, Subhadra?
So that's what bhakti is, paying attention?
No, bhakti is not paying attention, but that's one of the key elements of bhakti.
Could you describe what bhakti is then?
I could, but is everybody up for it? You guys are tired.
We want to hear what bhakti is.
How many people want to hear what bhakti is? Raise your hand. Yeah? What is bhakti? Bhakti is love. So what is love? What is love anyway? What's that song? Anybody loves somebody today? Is that the right song? What is love? What's love got to do? What is love? Anybody?
Selflessness.
Selflessness is a big part of it. Love is anukulyena. It means that you have to feel like you want the person you love to be happy. That's the first thing about love. The first thing about love is that you want somebody to be happy. Anukulyena. And then anushilnam. The second thing about love is you do something about it. You want somebody to feel happy and you do something about it. So bhakti is an expression of love. It's not just love. That's why Prabhupada generally goes to great lengths to always translate it as devotional service. Not just devotion, but devotional service. Because bhakti is a feeling that's expressed, not just a feeling. So love is not just a feeling. Love is an expression of a feeling. It's not that it is not a feeling. Love certainly is a feeling. But it's an expression of a feeling. So for example, like if you give somebody a hug, that's an expression of a feeling. That's bhakti. Or if you sing about somebody, that's an expression of a feeling. And then the other special things about love or bhakti, anukulyena, krishnanushilanam, that's bhakti. And bhakti uttama bhakti, or the highest type of bhakti is anyabhilashita. That it's not, doesn't have an ulterior agenda or motive to it. I love you, I want to make you happy, I'm going to give you a hug because you're an important person, and if I get in with you, I'm in like Flint. So maybe that's love, but that's not like pure love. That's adulterated love. That's impure love. So pure love is anyabhilashita. It doesn't have some kind of other motive to it. And jnana karma dinavartan. It's just direct. It's not covered up or distracted by something else. That's an important part about love that you should know about even in your day-to-day life. Like a lot of times men have problems with this. I love my family, so I got to go to work. I have no time to hug them, play with them. So that's a problem. Karma avrita. Love should not be covered by something indirect. It should be direct. The expression of love should be direct. That's when it's really fully bhakti. So similarly, for Krishna bhakti, it should be directly about Krishna. You should directly express yourself to Krishna. It shouldn't be for something else. Dear Krishna, I love you. please pay my bill. That is bhakti, but it's not pure bhakti. And then also, hey sweetie, I love you. And since the super soul is Krishna and the super soul is the root of you, then by me loving you, I love Krishna. So I don't need to actually chant Hare Krishna. That's like indirect love. So it shouldn't be indirect. It should be direct for Krishna, and it shouldn't be without an ulterior motive. So that's what Uttama, pure devotional service is. Pure bhakti is. An expression of love directly for Krishna without some other motive. And that's why chanting is the best. That's why chanting Hare Krishna, although it sounds like, what the heck is this? You're just chanting the same thing over and over again. Chanting Hare Krishna is the best way to do pure devotional service. Because what else are you going to get from it? There's no ulterior motive. I mean, maybe if you're really good at it, you'll get some people to think that you're hot stuff as a musician or something. Maybe there's some ulterior motive like that. But it's not much. I mean, big deal. 25 people think I'm great. I'm a great singer. So you can't really get that wrapped up in ulterior motive with chanting Hare Krishna, especially if it's not kirtan, especially if it's japa, and you're just chanting by yourself. That's the real one. That's where it's really at. And then it's direct. It's direct.